Okay, so hi everyone, thank you very much for watching or listening. Liam Hartley here with another episode of Presenting Champions. Today, joined by Rhys Shroomey Davies, a very cool name. Shroomey, we'll get into that in a minute as well. Today we're going to be talking about his journey, not only in boxing for H46 Pro, but also his life, his upbringing, some of his background and some of the challenges he's faced to become the man he is today. It's not just a boxing story today, it's a very inspirational story. We're going to be getting into some very cool stuff. So, Champ, thank you for coming on the show, mate, and it's awesome to have you with us today, to be honest.
No, thank you for having me. Appreciate it, mate.
Awesome. So just getting into it from the beginning, I mean, you obviously very kindly sent me some information about your life. Now, before we get into boxing, because obviously we will get into boxing and some of your fights and everything, but I want to go back in time and talk about sort of your early years and some of the challenges, like I just said in the intro, you've overcome to get where you are today. So first things first, talk to us a little bit about your upbringing, where you're from and what your sort of very early life was like. Let's start there. Let's start at the very beginning.
Yeah, so I think I was very fortunate. I had a really good upbringing. My parents separated when I was young, but like very important to get across. So I don't think that impacted me negatively at all. I think they were both really inspirational in the way they dealt with that. I very much had the best of both of them. I never saw any disagreement. So my upbringing was fantastic. I did grow up living with my grandparents. So I lived with my nan and bamp up until the age of about 17. They were a massive part of my life. They were there for some of my most probably important moments growing up. I think I've mentioned, and anyone who knows me personally will know that when I was young, I was always sort of involved in accidents, and we were in A&E all the time. To be fair, it was different then, wasn't it? We were out all the time up the woods. We didn't have the iPads and everything that we did today. I remember one occasion where I was out walking in my bamp. I must have been maybe 3, 4 years old. Um, and I fell off a local bridge known as the Green Bridge. Anyone from my part of the world will know that. 30, 40 foot drop, knocked myself out cold. And he literally, without the mobile telephones back then, had to pick me up and run me to the nearest hospital where I came round. So, yeah, I was just a very active, outgoing child, but had the perfect upbringing. Couldn't have asked for better.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it's good to touch on that and get into how it shaped you into the person you are today. I know with your BAMF, there's more to that story we'll get to in a minute. Before we do, you mentioned when we were talking before, when you fell off this bridge, you had like epilepsy or you had like a temporary situation. Can you just share with us what happened with that? Because you obviously had it and then overcame it, if I understand that correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, so obviously it was at a very young age, but I developed a type of epilepsy called petit mal, which isn't something that generally adult epilepsy sufferers experience. It's more to do with younger children, where basically I would just lose sight or would zone out. So rather than the fit-in that you sort of associate epilepsy with, I would just go very blank, which was quite scary to deal with as a young child, because it could be that we were in the swimming pool and suddenly I'm in the middle of a pool where I can't stand up, and I can't see anything. Or it could be that I'm in the middle of a classroom and all of a sudden you couldn't see anything. And I say the support around me was brilliant, teachers, my close friends, but it was absolutely a challenge. Thankfully, after a couple of years back and forth, regular hospital appointments, testing, I was discharged, and thankfully I've been able to live a healthy life since then.
Oh, that's good. That's good to hear that you overcame it. It must have been a scary situation. Was that from the fall then, or is it like an inherited thing that some children get? I mean, I've heard of it, but I don't know the ins
Yeah.
and outs.
Well, they've never, I suppose the doctors have never made the link as such. Some children can naturally develop it. We've always been of the view of the fact it sort of came after that event. It's easy to speculate whether that was related, although we've never had that sort of officially confirmed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's that's the first challenge you overcame to become the man you are today. But there are more. Now, obviously, when we move forward a few years now, and we get into the teenage years and things like this, obviously there were some difficult times there. Now, obviously, with this, I'm just going to put in there. I know you said that some of this stuff is a little bit hard to think about and talk about things like that. So, I totally respect that, and obviously, if anything is uncomfortable, just let me know. I never push people for things they don't want to talk about. It's only what you're willing to share. But when we come on, that time of your life, and I ask this because it sort of shows people who are going through similar situations how there is a way out of that, if you get what I mean. And that's my reason for asking. Can you share with us a little bit about that time of your life and some of the hardships you went through, where it started, and how you came out the other side? I know that's quite a broad question, but just that time of your life would be great to hear about, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, whilst it is quite challenging to think about and to talk about, because I probably hurt a lot of the people closest to me at that time, I do think it's important for me to speak about it, because I know that there's going to be hundreds and thousands of sort of young teenagers, young adults who are in that position now, who may not see a way out. But I want to reassure them that there absolutely is, if you can surround yourself with the right people and develop those good habits. So I think I mentioned to you that I grew up living with my grandparents. I was very close to my other nan on my dad's side as well. We're a very close knit family in general. And I lost both of them within a fairly short space of time, sort of towards the end of my school years, fresh out of school into college. And I've always been someone who I'm quite shut off emotionally. I don't really show a lot. I've always been a little bit old fashioned, I suppose, of, the world's a difficult place. Feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to help. Get up and get on with it. So I probably didn't deal with that as best I could have at the time. Although I didn't maybe show a great deal on the outside, I didn't process those emotions either. And I think that maybe had a lot to do with what sort of developed in the coming years then. From the age of about 17, I went from being like this really quiet boy in school, like even, the parents would go to parents evening, and the first thing they'd say is, Rhys is really quiet, he's really within himself. And then all of a sudden, I found myself sort of behaving really out of character, involved with a lot of things that I shouldn't have been involved with, stopped turning up to work and college, spent all the money in my savings account, which sort of my parents had worked hard over the years to put to one side for me. Had a couple of incidents, crashed a couple of cars just by acting like an idiot, really. Out partying nearly every night, getting involved in fights, coming home with clothes covered in blood. It was a really difficult time. Had gotten a little bit of trouble with the police as well, which, looking back now is probably the hardest thing to reflect on, because you see some people and you think, right, you've had a really difficult upbringing. I get how you've gone that way, but with me, I didn't have that. My parents were phenomenal. The support I had around me was brilliant, and I'd sort of got myself that way all by myself. And really just wasn't me. When I look back now, it's like looking at a completely different person. And as I said, if there's one thing I could probably change in life, it would be that stint. How my family stuck by me, I'll never know, because I absolutely didn't deserve it at the time. But I think, if anything, that's inspired me now, because every day of my life now, I live my life in a way where I want to make it up to them and make them proud, and show them they're actually, by standing by me, you've enabled me to live this really fulfilling life moving forward.
Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful way of sort of flipping it on its head and making a positive out of it. I mean, yeah, there's so many people out there going through times like that. I mean, or who have been through times like that, myself included, by the way. In those sorts of teenage years, it's a very, very difficult time, and it's quite a brave thing to speak out about that, I've got to say. Before we move past that, I mean, you mentioned obviously you're turning it into a positive for other people, and I'm sure people are proud of you now, with everything you've accomplished. But how did you sort of forgive yourself, for some of those times? Because that's a big process, if you don't mind me asking this, that people have to go through, where you sort of have to take into account not letting yourself off the hook, but actually some of the other things are saying, I was young and I didn't know better and I didn't know how to handle my emotions. And it's not excuses, but it's also the perspective on it. So how did you sort of go through that type of process, if you get what I mean with this one?
Yeah, to be honest, I think that's probably a journey that I'm still on. And that's why I think I say to you that it can be quite difficult to think about and to talk about, purely because, if I do get into that mind frame where I start thinking about that, instinctively you want to shut it off and pretend like it didn't happen. But like, I do a lot of reading psychology books on the power of positivity. And I've come to learn that a big part of life is taking responsibility and absolutely owning your own decisions. I think the second you start looking for excuses, you're not doing yourself any justice. So for me, it was just being able to look at myself hard in the mirror, acknowledge these things happen, but also coming to realize that is a very difficult time of your life. Do you mean you go from having all your decisions made for you as growing up to all of a sudden you're making these adult-based decisions, and it's very easy. You make one or two wrong ones, and you're down that wrong path. And as I'm sure we'll come on to in a little minute, the best thing that ever happened to me at that time was I met the girl's mother, and as soon as I found out we were expecting my oldest daughter Ruby, that it was no longer about me anymore. It was all about being the best I could be for them, and I think that was really the sort of the motivation I needed to then kickstart my journey towards, I suppose, being the real me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a beautiful description, I must say, and a very, very powerful transformation. Because yeah, when we come to that time, I mean, that is next, sort of on the list, if you like. Obviously, becoming a parent, and you've mentioned here when you sent me over some of this stuff, obviously getting used to paying bills and sort of transitioning into, adult life, basically working with the company that I believe you're still with. So yeah, the same type of thing. Talk to us just a little bit more about that time in your life, because obviously that was a transition when, um, you got yourself together and you started focusing on, as you mentioned, something bigger than yourself, with that being family. So yeah, just anything you'd like to share with us about that time and about the transition you went to into sort of a greater maturity and a greater awareness and that type of thing, please.
Yeah, so I think everything happened really, really quickly. I went from sort of being a sort of 18-year-old lad with no real responsibilities, could go out when I wanted, regular holidays. Met my partner at the time, the girl's mum, and within literally a few short months, we found out we were expecting our oldest daughter. She already had a son named Riley. So I very much went from having zero responsibility to within 2 years, by the time I was 21, was responsible for 3 children. We had our own place, you say, responsible for bills, working as many hours as possible to provide. So I think that was a very steep learning curve in terms of what it meant to be an adult and to be a parent. Also, you had the challenges, I suppose, of a lot of the guys that I was very friendly with not having any of this. So being able to go out, do the things that they wanted when they wanted, and me having to make those decisions to not go out, to not go on these holidays, to not maybe attend some of the football trips. And to be honest, that was something I found quite difficult to transition with for a few years. And I think it's only maybe the last couple of years, even now, that I probably say that I'm really in that position where I can absolutely make mature decisions on what I can and can't be doing. I think even throughout my early 20s, whilst I'm very, very proud of, the dad I've been, and I think I said to people closest to me before, the one thing I'm proudest of, I've got a lot wrong in my life, but those girls, I've done everything spot on with them. But even then, I think if I look at some of my personal relationships, friendships, my decision making possibly still weren't great. I was still at times putting a good time over stability moving forward. Got myself in a lot of debt, which has taken me probably till now to sort of get myself out of and get myself on a stable footing. But I mean, looking back at that, I didn't think about where I would be, had those girls not come into my life. And they're my why, I suppose. Why you get up in the morning, those cold dark mornings, why you do what you do, and they're my reason of when I have maybe a bad moment or I think about making a bad decision, I just got to think about them once and realize actually it's bigger than me.
I love that. That's an amazing description. And I have to say, I mean, your um, self honesty and that type of thing is really quite inspiring in itself. I know that might sound strange to you, but you mentioned earlier about being completely honest with yourself and owning your decisions and things, and that's quite a powerful thing that really comes over with yourself. And that's not even a question. I'm just saying that that's actually really cool.
Thank you.
Transitioning through. But obviously, the flip side of this, which you've also mentioned to me, um, when we were setting this up, and you've also sort of touched on then, is about like the mental health side of things, and that's a very label, I mean, it's a very, it's something that's thrown around a lot these days. You've got different sides to it. It's great that there's so much openness about it, but at the same time, what you said about earlier about keeping a straight face and keeping moving forward, I think we could also do with a bit more of that. So it's a complicated issue. I mean, it's got different sides to it. But at the same time, you've been through your own struggles with this, which I read when you sent me the information. I was basically thinking, wow. I mean, it's not much of a phrase, wow, but really, I was quite amazed at what you've been through and what you've overcome in this area. So, can you talk with us a little bit about some of your struggles? I mean, there's stuff to do with these football trips and using that as an escape. There's stuff to do with ballooning up in weight. That's
Mhm.
that's that's a great topic to get into. And obviously your vamp and how he sort of inspired you and gave you a kick up the backside to get going. Basically, I think is more or less how to put it. So, with that sort of those sorts of struggles and things, in your own words, what are some of the things you've been through? And I'm aware, again, this is a bit of a sort of delicate topic. So, again, if anything's difficult to talk about, just let me know. Because it's very brave you putting this stuff out there. I don't know if I don't care what anyone says. I mean, it really is to be on here sort of talking about your life. It's a brave thing. But yeah, with the mental health side of things, what are some of the things you've been through with that, please, champ? Let's talk about that.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, this isn't something so much I find difficult to talk about. Sometimes you feel a little bit selfish talking about it because I see people who are in far worse positions. I think for me personally, going back from my 20s, mid 20s, I probably got myself in a little bit of a rut um, where I think I'd been in a same job role for a very long time, lost that get up and go in work. And it was a very demanding role where I was taking on a lot of other people's issues. And I think over a period of time, that starts to wear you down. Things maybe weren't going as great at home, weren't getting on particularly well. And my way of coping with that, rather than sort of reaching out and talking, was to put on a smiley face all week, every week, and then come to a Saturday morning, I'd go away with a football, would drink as much as humanly possible within a short space of time. Would probably not remember 8 to 10 hours of my life. Would wake up the next day feeling absolutely rubbish till about Thursday, and then start the cycle again. It was a very vicious circle. I was going away on football trips. Football's always been a massive part of my life. Big Cardiff fan, big Wales fan. And it's probably taken me until now to learn to have that as a healthy part of my life, which is a hobby that I go and enjoy, not that escape that it maybe once was, where it was just about going and drinking as much as you could, getting as drunk as possible, being a bit of a Jack the Lad, trying to outdo the others, trying to outdo yourself from last time. And that obviously had a really detrimental impact on not just like my personal mental health, but probably those immediately around me as well. Resulted in me and the girl's mother. Well, I say it resulted in, there was lots of other things going on, but we ended up separating. And that was when I probably stopped taking care of myself, was eating what I wanted, didn't do any exercise, drinking what I wanted. When I didn't have the girls, they absolutely still remained a priority. But when I didn't have them, I was living this very unhealthy lifestyle. And I think I touched on earlier how close I was with my BAMP. He was very much my idol growing up, and he was very much into his fitness. He used to do a bit of boxing years ago in the army. He always used to share his army stories with me about touring. I played rugby for a number of years growing up, and he was there every Sunday. People used to joke I'd always be the best dressed there because he'd be up scrubbing my boots and cleaning my kit. And it weren't until he probably called out to me on a visit one day where I sat down on a cup of tea with him, and he said to me, "Rhys, you've put on some weight. You look really unhealthy. What's going on?" And at the time, I was up to just about 15 stone. So to give that some perspective, I'm only 5'5", and I'm currently fighting at 9 stone 13. So we're talking about an extra third of me on my body. And I did a lot of soul searching after that, and decided, look, actually, you need to do something about this. Started reading, go back in the gym, started running. Within a space of a year, lost over 4 stone, and got myself up to a position where I was running like full distance marathons. And that, as part of that fitness journey, sort of led me back to boxing and back into the sort of boxing world.
Yeah, and coming to the boxing side of things, I think it's a moment a lot of people have been waiting for, listening to this as well. But even though we've given it a great build up with the story of how you got to that point, yeah, so you got back into the boxing side of things, as I understand it, originally with like the white collar sort of charity type of thing, and then it sort of went from there. But you mentioned to me at that time you still weren't 100% disciplined, basically, for want of a better way of putting it, and it was still took a while to get into the sort of unlicensed semi-pro or whatever you want to call it with Robert and Tara and what they're doing. Talk to us first of all about those early fights, like the charity side of things. You decided to get in there and have a go. How did they go? What training were you doing? Just anything you'd like to share about that sort of early phase of the boxing thing.
Yeah, so I did a couple of charity fights back in, I think it was 2017, so a long while ago. And that was, I've always been a boxing fan, enjoyed watching it on the telly. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily something to brag about, but I've always had that little aggressive side in me. I think I had it for years playing rugby, where you could let out that anger, that frustration on the weekend. And then I think when I stopped playing, probably lost that a little bit. So boxing's an opportunity to, just have a bit of a go. But I think we had 2 free sessions a week for the charity shows. And we'd do like a couple of runs with like one of the boys, which we'd maybe run 2-3 kilometers. And at the time I thought that was loads of training. But when you sort of look back and compare it to my schedule now, we think actually I wasn't doing anywhere near enough. And I was still like going out on the weekends at that time. Those charity fights didn't go, to be honest, particularly well. They lost both of them on points. But at that time, like I said, I wasn't thinking about how do you win a fight. It was very much around, right, get in there and just have a bit of a tear up and a bit of a scrap, and try and do something a bit positive. So I left it there then for years. I say I was never going to be in a position to be able to compete when you're carrying 15 stone around with you as 5'5". And then after I decided to get back on my sort of fitness journey, after my conversation, my BAMP, signed up for one event, took it a lot more serious, not like today, but certainly did a lot more and felt really good heading into that event. Had an opponent that I felt I was going to beat comfortably, and this was going to be my little shining light moment, my little recognition for all the hard work I'd put in. And unfortunately, he pulled out on the day, a couple of hours before the event. He was actually there with me, and I remember getting very, very frustrated at the time, because he turned up, and I mean, there's probably no nice way to say this. I think I was in really good shape at the time, was really confident, and was a bit of a presence there, and he just didn't want it, and sort of set and come across very, very intimidated by it. And then as soon as it was confirmed that the fight was off, he was out skipping around and was then at the bar buying drinks. So I remember being really frustrated at that. I felt like I'd had my moment stolen. Then signed up for another event. Again, it was a white collar. It was a rematch against one of the guys who beat me back in 2017. And it was all about, for me, showing that, look, now I'm taking this serious, now I'm training. I felt this was, this is a fight that I'm going to win. And then COVID happened. And unfortunately, that fight got pulled about a week and a half before. So I think we probably had years and years of frustration there in not being able to show the world what I can do. And I think, I'll come on to the more recent, like the semi-pro stuff in a moment. But for anyone who was at my fight last weekend, who would have saw the absolute outpour of emotion, at the final bell, I think there's a lot of years and frustration and pent up anger that's gone in that was just released in one moment there as soon as they announced me as the winner.
Yeah, absolutely. That does happen a lot in the game, and yeah, I think people can be almost a bit hard on that, but at the end of the day, it's they don't realize the release. We'll come to that in a moment. So yeah, getting into this side of things. I mean, really, what you're sort of mainly known for now. Obviously, we'll talk about the fights in a minute, but unfortunately, as I understand it, the fights are sort of punctuated by a little bit of tragedy here. Well, quite a lot of tragedy here, because I'm just making sure I've got the timeline right with this. If I haven't, just correct me. But this was started by a promise that you made to your Bab. Is that correct? Before his passing, I know this can't be easy to talk about either. So I do respect that, especially from how close you were. I mean, it really comes over. Even sort of across the camera here. Can you share with us a little bit about that time? Again, I respect it's not easy, but the promise that you made to him, and what happened as the catalyst for
Yeah,
what next.
absolutely. So I think, the more and more I got back into the box, and every conversation we had, he'd always ask me, how I was getting on, when you're meant to be fighting. And I found it really difficult that I'd never got that opportunity to come home and say, oh, bam, I did it, I won. I got that win, because the 2 fights got cancelled whilst I was back into it for various reasons. I didn't actually get, to make this promise to him before he passed, unfortunately. It was just that we'd always talk through boxing. He'd talk about his time in the army. At the end of 2020, he sadly passed away, became ill, went to hospital between Christmas and New Year's. It was a really difficult time. I needed to take a couple of weeks out, took some time off work. And I suppose it's learning from your experiences, isn't it? So, I knew that I hadn't handled what had happened when I'd lost my two nans particularly well previously. And then as a result, the lifestyle, the bad choices I'd gone on to make a couple of years after that. So I was very keen to not sort of make those same mistakes again. So I did a lot of sort of soul searching, a lot of long walks, listening to music, a lot of reading, and do a lot of thinking in terms of, right, how can I turn this into something positive and make sure that I use this negative emotion to really drive myself to be the best I can be. And the solution I came up with was actually the one thing that I think would pay my respects the best would be the boxing. So I never got to tell him face to face, but I just little promise mentally between myself and him was that, look, I'm gonna give this boxing a real go. And I told him I'm gonna become a champ. I'm gonna get a belt, and I'll bring a belt home, and it'll be in his honor.
Well, that's a beautiful thing. That promise made, and obviously learning the lesson, turning it into a positive this time. It's all well, it's quite moving actually, to be quite honest with you. Obviously getting deeper into the boxing from there. Talk to us a little bit about obviously the recent fights you've had. I think the first one was Carl Watts. Obviously, I've been there for a couple of them as well, doing the photos and everything. But yeah, just walk us through the fights and obviously, I don't have a really narrow question about it, but just your memories, the highs and the lows. There's a bit of both with this. Obviously coming off a high more recently, but yeah, H46 Pro and your journey with them. Let's get into that side of things.
Yeah, so I think for me, the charity shows that I'd done years ago were with Robbie and Cara, who were the organisers. It was just the normal H46 white collar then. So I'd kept an eye on them as an organisation from that point, and could see that they developed. They were now running a semi-pro boxing league on the unlicensed circuit. And that'd always been something I'd kept an eye on in the background. So when I decided to, really give this boxing a go, that seemed the logical step, was to reach out to Robbie. And he said, look, we've got some sparring trials, some open trials coming up down in my stake. You're more than welcome to come along. So I was doing a little bit of work with like Rhys Edwards and Gary Lockett at the time. Only the odd one-to-one, just helped me improve technically a little bit, and just sparring with my mates essentially down the gym. There wasn't anything scientific or technical to it. The more I look back, I was probably the most unprepared person there. But turned up at the sparring trials, and they went really well. I got put in with a young amateur and performed really well. And then they actually put me and Carl Watts to spar against each other. And I suppose everyone says, like, styles make fights. We just gelled straight away, and we only sparred around. And straight away, Robbie pulled us out, and within a few days had messaged to say, I want to make you two for the contender title at 66 kilograms, H46 Pro 62. Didn't really think, and this is something that I'm also trying to work on at the moment, is sometimes I can be too brave to my own good. Like, there was no logical part of me that thought you're jumping straight into a title in your first semi-pro fight against a guy with 20 odd fights and you haven't even got any amateur background. Like, I'm one of those people, unfortunately, you could offer me a fight with a 20 stone heavyweight and I'm going to go, yeah, I'll probably take him out. That's just the mentality that I've got. So took the fight. Went into it really unprepared. I mean, I had my best mate in the corner with me, as my corner man, and we went up against the sort of boxer tricks army, if you will. I mean, you've seen them on the events; they're such a presence, and I'll talk more about how that's developed down the line. But I was never prepared to win that fight. But looking back, I think I sold over 100 tickets. Carl brought like 50, 60 people down. It was built as the big derby card from Swansea, and I think whilst I didn't win the fight, I came out really overexcited. I'll be honest, and I've shared this with Carl since then, who's become a very good friend of mine, is that at the time there was a real dislike there. I came out, I wanted to hurt him. Got overcarried away, got caught off balance and got scored a 10-8 round straight away within 20 seconds. Came back into it, made it competitive, and lost a narrow points decision in the end. But I say to this day, it's probably, even after the win last time around, is maybe my proudest moment in boxing to date, that, because the event that we were able to put on, there's seasoned professional boxers who won't have fought in an atmosphere like we had that night, and everyone at the gym still talks about that. It was electric. And for me to be able to give a good account of myself, win rounds, be competitive against someone with all those advantages, was big for me. It was a big confidence boost, especially seeing, Carl's now gone on to win silver titles, gold titles, and for my opinion is arguably pound for pound number one with the organisation. So, I still look back at that fight with nothing but fond memories and positivity. And funny enough, it was after that fight that I got put in touch with Jason Williams and with the Boxer Trick stable, who I'm now working with. He invited me down. He messaged me privately and mentioned some of the things that he'd been impressed with, some of the stuff that he thought I should work on. I had a couple of sessions with him, but because his gym is down in Swansea and I'm in Cardiff, didn't see it as being logistically possible. Sparred with some rounds with Carl, and then at the next event, they give me the opportunity to go back in for another title fight because I performed well against Jason Bryant at the division below. Now, funny enough, Jason and Carl, my last two opponents, both headlined and main evented at the recent show that we were on. And Jason came into this with a 100% knockout ratio. Again, it was probably another example of a fight that I've looked at and didn't really think it through. The logical thing would have been to try and notch up a couple of wins, but it was like, no, it's title opportunity. And all I'm thinking about is that belt, because the promise I've made to my BAMPs was like, I don't care who you put in front of me, I'm straight back in there. Again, it was probably underprepared, and I say underprepared, but underprepared from a boxing standpoint. In terms of like my strength and conditioning and all that sort of stuff, I was working down with Tony Borg and Gavin Gwynn at St. George's, and they were amazing with me. I went to them. Like conditioning, I could have fought 12 rounds. It wasn't an issue. My strength and conditioning coach Lewis Mills has been with me from day dot. Who also sponsors me. He, don't charge me anything for my sessions, and he always gets me in phenomenal shape. He's become a good, close personal friend of mine as well. And we boxed really well against Jason. We won the first couple of rounds. With 30 seconds left in the third round, everyone unanimously accepted that we were about to go 3 rounds up in a 4-round fight. And, that fight hurt me a lot because I felt like I was this close to fulfilling that promise, and then got caught with one big right hand that changed everything. Don't really remember anything after that. I managed to survive the rest of that round and then got finished, unfortunately, in the fourth. And I'll be honest, at that point, I was very, very close to saying, do you know what, this ain't for me. I was very downbeat on myself, and it felt a little bit like, look, this big win that you're looking for just isn't gonna come. So I had some time out this summer. I was best man at my mate's wedding, usher at another wake, had a couple of holidays abroad, did a lot of soul searching and said, look, I'm going to come back. I'm going to give this one last big push. And I reached out to Jason down at Boxer Tricks and said, look, what do you think about taking me on full time? He found some slots for me. And the second I stepped foot in that gym this time, I knew that I was in the right place. And this is nothing derogatory against any of the previous coaches I've worked with. They've all been fantastic with me. But in terms of what I need at this time and the level I'm at, there is nobody better than Jason. He literally, I walked in, did a couple of sessions with me where he looked at me on the bags, on the pads, and then basically ripped me apart and just said, right, we need to build you up from the ground upwards and totally redefine your boxing style. We need to improve you technically. And we've only worked together for maybe 3 months, but I feel totally transformed in terms of my ability to box physically. But also I think mentally is probably the biggest difference he's made for me. Like I went into my recent fight Saturday, and this sounds mental, but like there was just absolutely zero doubt in my mind that I was going to win that fight. I just wasn't going to let it happen. He's unlocked that self-belief in me that I've always lacked, I think, because of those couple of tough losses. You almost go into like a sparring partner mentality if you're not careful. We think, right, I'm in here and tough, I can be competitive, but can I win? And Jason made me realize, yeah, you can. And not only can you win, but you can win looking good, and you can do really well in this sport.
Amazing. It's amazing how you've turned that on its head. There's so many, different things you mentioned in there. Some really good tips and advice. There's a lot of things. But yeah, talk to us about obviously this last fight. Big win, obviously defeating Shane Williams, a former contender champion and everything. And obviously your goal came true. And obviously I know it's only the sort of the first step of the goal, and there's more to come with the future. We'll get to that in a minute, but yeah, I mean, how did it feel? What was the atmosphere like? You know, anything you'd want to share about it, because I think it's such a thing that after everything you've been through, after sort of sticking it out for a long while as well, it finally came true. Absolutely amazing. So, yeah, just talk to us about that fight a little bit, please, and how you felt and everything.
Yeah, it was huge for me. And I mean, you mentioned the atmosphere, and that's one thing I'm very lucky, and I suppose we're renowned for on the circuit is every event I've been to have probably been the biggest ticket seller. We always bring an unbelievable atmosphere. And that's nothing to do with me. That's everything to do with the supporters I've got around me. I've just got the best people who never fail to show up. I mean, you're talking about tables being £500-600 a pop. We're in a financial crisis at the moment, and every time we sell all these tickets, it never fails to amaze me. So I'm very grateful for everyone who comes along. So as usual, the atmosphere was incredible, and it was just something different about that day. I think joining the Boxer Tricks team, I knew I'd had the sparring I'd had throughout camp with like Carl, who's now the gold champion, with the other boys down the gym. I had in my mind that regardless of what my opponent brings, I don't feel personally they're going to be any better than anyone I'm fighting in the gym 2-3 times a week. So I had that mentality. I had Jason and Sean and Keenan in the gym, telling me all my positive traits and what I needed to do. Met up with Carl on the morning of the fight, and we turned up together. And it was funny because like the MC who's there every show, Danny Kendrick, looked at us as if to say, "What are you two doing rocking up together?" It was only a year ago. You were here trying to take each other's heads off. So everything about the day was very surreal. I had the pressure as well of being the first semi-pro fight of the night after the white collar and the first Boxer Tricks competitor up. So that was big for me because I wanted to, I think being part of that stable, you don't just carry with you that you're doing it for yourself, is you carry the pressure you want to do it for your teammates. You want to show the world what you've been working on. And to be honest, in terms of my performance, at the time I came off, I was very happy with it. Looking back now, I'm probably the most self-critical person in the world. I'm looking and thinking, and this is no disrespect to Shane, by the way, because I thought he came down and he put up an unbelievable performance when you consider, some of the challenges he's got going on in his gym at the moment. I thought he was awesome, and he dragged me into a fight I didn't want to fight. But if I'm being critical of myself, the intention was to come out and box and show all the boxing technique that I've been working on and really show that actually I'm a really skillful fighter. And within 5 seconds, I got drawn into an absolute wreck. And over 3 rounds, it was just non-stop action. And it was basically last man standing who's going to outlast who, which selfishly, like, I absolutely love that. I love a scrap, and they're always shouting at me in the gym and saying you don't need to do that. But I can't help it. It's something that comes out as soon as I get it. That's it. I just love a tear up. But looking back, that's something I'll be working on in the gym with Jason. Just trusting my boxing, because when I sit behind my jab and I box, I've got a lot more than what I've shown so far. Had a really strong. First round was pretty nip and tuck. Shane, again, credit. He's got a lot of advantages. He's 5'11", I'm 5'5". He was a southpaw, and I've been in with a southpaw before. He's got that experience of, I think it was 9 or 10 fights on this platform. He's been a champion before. He's been and done what I aspire to do. Close round was the first round was nip and tuck. Second round, I had a great round. At one stage, I thought he was ready to go. I really hurt him. Probably wasted far too much energy chasing the stoppage, trying to take him out. And I'll be honest with you, the last round, I was hanging on in there. Any opportunity to clinch, I'll be honest, I was taking it. And it became a battle of wills, and I just knew that I wanted him more. There's no one that wants him more than me in the circuit. I firmly believe that. So once it became into that in the trenches type fight, I just knew there was no way I was ever going to lose. And then you saw like the response at the end when my arm got lifted was like such a weight had been lifted. The pressure of the world was gone. And now I feel like what you'll see now in future performances is you'll see a more relaxed, pressure-free fighter. I haven't got that pressure on me. I now feel like I'll be able to show my boxing, and next year you'll see a totally different fighter.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the last thing to get into, really, is the future, because obviously congratulations on a great win, by the way. Get that in there, because personally, I was very happy for you, only because I've seen the work that you've put in, to some degree, obviously not all of it, but you can tell, and how you're sort of improving every fight. And after those last couple of tough losses, I was very, very happy for you. Moving on into obviously next year, 2023, and everything, it pretty much seems like it's onwards and upwards, and it's the future's very, very bright, to be honest. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, like with the improvements you've made, and um, life as a whole. I mean, from certainly from what you were describing to me. So this is really the last thing before we wrap this up, and it's a good length of time for people's attention spans as well. To be quite honest, with the future, I mean, where are you going from here? What are your plans from here? Your plans for next year? What's lighting your fire now? Just talk to us about the dreams and goals, basically, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for the end of this year now, I'm not going to be back in the ring. It's going to be around staying in the gym, keep continuing to drill those technical improvements with Jason, trying to improve as much as I can, enjoying a little bit of downtime with family. I've got a couple of holidays booked, and then next year, the goal is very much to pick up multiple titles, fulfill that promise I made to my BAMP, and I'm desperate to bring a belt home for the girls. They love the thought of Daddy being a boxer. They've been down the gym posing for photos with the other fighters. They absolutely love it. So it's very much around picking up as many titles as I can. Now, what that looks like, I leave that firmly in the hands of Jason. He'll be agreeing all my fights and my matches moving forward. I trust him absolutely to guide the pathway for me. That there's no element of doubt that working with him, not only will he continue to improve me as a boxer, but he'll map out the perfect pathway with me that'll get me where I want to be. Long term, there's a few other bits that interest me. I look at like some of the hybrid boxing stuff. I think that's something that I'd like to have a go at before I sort of call it a day. But for next year, it's all about picking up those belts and continuing to sort of be the best person I can out the ring for my girls, and continue to pay back my family for for sticking by me through those difficult times.
Absolutely amazing. Well, the future is very, very bright. And again, I'm not just saying that. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, improving every fight. Getting advice from the best people. The fact you work on the mental side as well. I mean, I think that's very important because a lot of people overlook that. You mentioned earlier about the positive thinking and all this type of thing, and I've been around the fight game such a long time that you can often tell when people come together for the face off or whatever, who's going to win, not just based on fitness but based on like the strength of will and the strength of belief they have. And some people will overlook that and say, oh no, it's just the styles, and obviously it is the styles, but it's a lot. I think a lot of it's up here as well, even though boxing's a physical thing. So yeah, very, very bright future. I just want to thank you for coming on the show. Really, just to wrap this up. And I want to thank you for being an open book as well. I mean, I know that's the type of person you are, but it's made it a lot easier because you've just sort of spoken from the heart type of thing. And I still think it's a brave thing to do. I mean, some of the stuff we touched on, like the highest points in your life and the lowest points in your life, and putting all that out there, got a lot of respect for that. So just thank you for your time, mate. It's been awesome. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you have as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it, and hopefully catch up soon. Next time we do this, I'll have a couple of belts on me, hopefully.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.